Okay, before I start, I'm just going to say that at some point I might actually ask you if you're going to give some sort of response, give an honest response, if I remember to do that bit at the end. Okay, so visions of a sustainable university. We've spoken a lot about sustainability. As we know, it's a very commonly used term. And what I perceive to be a sustainable university is something around noise, nuisance, community fragmentation, carbon emissions. Clearly you're thinking, no, I've got the wrong slide up. What I'm actually trying to show you is how many other people perceive universities to actually be. The whole point of the university is that there's a huge amount of enormous facility for growth in a responsible manner. What we're really looking for is, within universities, you've got education, you've got learning, you've got the ability for people to transform their futures. You've also got the way that you can actually make a change in the way that society is structured and the way that politicians can manage to gather the evidence for moving forwards. What do students think about this? So if you think about all the good points of universities and you think about, well, you've got the potential to try to make a lot of money, you've got the potential to have a great job for the future. The reality is, you might think, well, students are only going to be interested in employability. Thankfully, this evidence shows this is not the case. This is a joint study taken apart by the National Union Students and the Higher Education Academy, and they found a resounding yes in that students are interested in sustainability, and they actually feel that universities have a responsibility to try to deliver sustainability in one form or another. What I want to try to put to you now is, what does that actually look like? What can it look like? And the first point to consider here is one of the main things universities are actually driven for, the curriculum. Sometimes we lose sight of the curriculum, we lose sight of the value and the fact that people come out with degrees that matter for the future, but sometimes it can be slightly compartmentalized. If you think, looking at the curriculum, there are a range of different subject areas. Sometimes these are taught in silos, and they're taught in silos from the perspective of sometimes the excuse is used that the accreditation bodies won't let us do interdisciplinary work. We're very good, particularly here at the University of Southampton, in cross-disciplinary research work, less so when it comes to the curriculum. Now, one of the points that people try to think of having a sustainable curriculum, and a lot of the talk around the sector is about the notion of embedding sustainable development across the curriculum. Can that be achieved? Should it be achieved? Some people say yes, some people say no. What I would argue is that you really want to try to have a rich and varied curriculum that allows people to try to frame sustainable development, responsible futures when they graduate within the context of their discipline. Not taking away the fundamentals of those disciplines, not taking away the ability for them to understand economics, for them to understand business, for you to understand humanities, but framing it within the context of sustainable development from the truest sense when we're talking about social, economic, and environmental. My worry has always been that when it comes to sustainable development, people think that it's just been co-opted by the environmental movement. Now, at heart, I'm very much an environmental scientist, I'm an environmentalist, but it's about a balanced approach, and that can be achieved through modules such as these. The Curriculum Innovation Programme, I think, offers tremendous opportunities in terms of trying to understand health and well-being, making ethical decisions in a complex world. You've got great modules such as global challenges. You've got living with environmental change. Trying to also understand the way that the world is developing through looking at the most powerful nation on the earth within some point soon, understanding modern China. But not just studying it in isolation, studying it with colleagues from other disciplines. So you then understand the perspectives of other disciplines, and you're taught by experts from different subject areas. Again, we're not just talking purely about their particular research in psychology. However, there's also a lot of talk saying that you can't necessarily have an embedded curriculum without really properly understanding the depth of it. I always advocate that if you really want to try to properly understand sustainable development, you don't just have it as a shallow across the whole curriculum, across the whole university. You actually allow people to study it in detail. We can't lose sight of the necessity of understanding sustainable development in detail, and also trying to do it in ways that actually engage people, ways that actually innovate people's thinking. So one of the things that we do on the sustainability module is we try to get students to take themselves out of their normal situation here in the United Kingdom, for example, our UK-based students, and make them try to represent other nations and try to reach agreement on sustainable development goals. The purpose of this is that when you're really looking at the political structure systems, you sometimes think, why can't they get agreement? Why can't they just decide on the best way forward in terms of the Kyoto Protocol, for example? The reality is that the political systems are determined by the economic infrastructures in different countries. They're also determined by cultural elements, religious elements. They're also determined by the resource constraints. You've got to take that into your mind and then position yourselves accordingly. So you try to give different countries different power as well, which reflects how they actually have influence on the political stage. Interesting thing we found about this was that environmental science students, for example, who go in with a predominance towards environmental concerns, end up more voting for social concerns. And that's the sort of progressive thinking that you need to have. However, in order to deliver a curriculum, you need to have a sustainable university infrastructure. Now, traditionally, sustainable development universities has been seen along the lines of operations in terms of campus greening. So, for example, here at the university, we've got the lovely Valley Gardens area. And yes, you do need to have a rich biodiversity within a university campus if you've got the facility. But this is an important point. Not all universities have got the facility to actually have green space. Many of them are in built-up urban areas. Therefore, it becomes more difficult to try to contextualize this within different situations. The point being, every university is different. What I'm going to try to talk to you about today in terms of a sustainable university, I'm not going to say there is a model that applies to everybody, because each university is different. One of the biggest problems that you've got in any university situation is the sheer number of people. Universities are small towns. You are looking at a population of about 25,000 here at the University of Southampton. That has got an enormous impact, not just in terms of the university itself here, so you've got to think about how you travel within the university, but also external from the university as well. Thinking about how you're going to work between different campuses. But the really big elephant in the room for the university community is that a huge amount of the carbon emissions from a university come through the research activity. How do you actually knit sustainable transport into that? Everybody loves going to a good conference. Everybody loves meeting people. The problem is there's a huge carbon issue at stake here. So what you've really got to try to think of in these terms is how this then links in to the research. When it comes to the research of a university, yes, we do brilliant work at a number of universities in terms of individual research agendas, linking with other people in different parts of the university, and also making sure that you link to the rest of the university community on a global basis. What I would argue is that the university environment forms a perfect space for experimenting. Later on, you're likely to learn about some of the work done on sustainable energy within the university. Why not use the university space in terms of the research agenda, in terms of trying to develop sustainable energy solutions, in terms of trying to develop sustainable transport solutions? Use the university operations for research, as well as pushing back the frontiers of science, pushing back the frontiers of humanities, pushing back the frontiers that really lead to sustainable solutions. If you look at this word cloud here, you will notice that you've got a range of different subject areas. And this is definitely a strength of the university environment and has been for a number of decades now. That ability for different disciplines to work with each other, for them to actually collaborate and to try to influence policy. Now, as I've said already, here at the university, there's a lot of good research work that goes on, but I would also advocate that we should never lose sight of the brilliant work that is done by university researchers in terms of, for example, the International Governmental Panel on Climate Change. This work, which is truly shaping politics, which is truly shaping our futures, is driven by collaboration. Collaboration with a common theme in mind, that theme that we're all here for today in terms of sustainability. Because what we're really looking at now is an experience. And when we talk about a university experience, we automatically start thinking about the student experience. All the rhetoric these days in the university environment, across higher education sector, coming from government, the policymakers, but also the decision makers on high, is all about enhancing the student experience. And that is exactly what should happen. but try to think about the sustainability implications of that decision-making process in terms of how you work with students. Students are amazing. And I'm not just saying that because of the audience we've got today, but the main reason I work in university is because I love working with students. It's that simple. Their energy, their enthusiasm, and many times they will go off and they will do their own work and it will be absolutely fantastic. But I actually think that what we should be trying to do is to try to come up with models and activities that allow students and staff to work together. Students frequently have the ideas, students frequently have the enthusiasm. Equally, some staff frequently have the energy and enthusiasm as well, but they can't necessarily do everything themselves. Some people here will be familiar with this slide in terms of blackout, the switch-off scheme that we run in the university. The idea being that if you want to try to monitor the carbon emissions of a university, you need to find out what's been wasted first. So we had the idea, switch everything off. Just switch everything off and do it on one night. Now, can you get members of staff to do that? Of course you can't. It's just not possible. So what you need is you need to have enthusiastic, imaginative students. Also, they're best at engaging the rest of the student community. If you say you want to try to get 300 volunteers, are you going to get 300 volunteers and say, come and do energy audit? It's not exactly exciting, is it? Students, however, come up with blackout, a night out with the lights out. And then we come up with ideas about having a legacy in terms of the message that's going out. So this would not have been possible without students. We needed students to go around and do all this work, get people enthused, spread the message around the university and spread it wider around the community as well. However, it's also not achievable without staff. When we went to the Vice-Chancellor and said, we want to do this, all we're really asking is to allow the university to be open on a Friday night for a load of people wearing hoodies to walk into all the offices of the university and switch everything off. What could possibly go wrong? Now, you see, if you let students do that on their own, are you going to be allowed to do it? Because of the security issues. And you've got to protect students from accusations of nicking exam papers, theft, etc. You have to get staff to go in with them. So partnership approach is what it is all about. Some institutions, for example, the University Trinity St David of Wales, they've got this notion of inspire in terms of making the university experience for the staff and the students an integrated whole. True holistic sustainability management. They've won a Guardian Award, deservedly so for it. Universities like the University of Plymouth, they've got sustainability written into the job description of all the staff across the whole university. That is the way to properly embed it into people's minds. It feeds into the teaching, feeds into the research, feeds into the way you engage yourself in the university, how you travel to work, how you try to work in terms of going to different conferences, making the decision, is it a worthwhile attendance? This is probably my favourite example, actually. This is Europe's first university and community partnership programme to develop a library. Now, if you think back to my first slide, and I was saying about community fragmentation, noise, nuisance, antisocial behaviour, universities working in partnerships with communities, allowing the brilliance of the education environment from the lecturers, from the work of the students, actually seep out into the community. A shared library resource built together for the university and also for the local community. That is something where a university is giving back to the local community, as well as having all the global aspirations in terms of global responsibility. Now, the way that I'd like to look at this is, and this is going to sound a little bit cheesy, but looking at sustainability at the core of the university. And that's what we're trying to achieve. Sustainability is at the heart of all decision-making. It links into the curriculum because you're trying to come up with imaginative ways of teaching. You're utilising the learning space to engage the students. You're utilising the local community space to teach. Also, you're linking back through in terms of the operation, in terms of allowing those imaginative assessments to work in partnership with the operational staff, because they will understand the data that's necessary. If you can get students working on assessment forms that link into the operations, you can also change the environmental footprint of the university. That was what we did with Blackout, because we're trying to change the decision-making process. But it's always got to be evidence-based. But you can't really have a truly green, so to speak, operational element of the university if you haven't got the research to shape those operations. The research shapes the operations from a sustainability perspective, but also the research, all the work, a lot of the work we're going to hear about today as well, feeds into the student experience in terms of the curriculum. But the experience itself wraps up everything, because the experience is the staff experience, is the student experience, it is the community experience. and it seeps throughout the whole of the system. You've got to have the experience wrapping the whole up. What we'd like to propose is the notion of a globally responsible university operating in terms of local responsibility. Thank you very much for your attention. Do you think this is an idea worth spreading?
Yes.
Thank you.